get started. So my name is Sally Marie. I'm part of the committee that is the AHATS Academy of Arts and Sciences. And we produce about once a month or 8 times a year, something like that, speaking engagements. So I think all of you are local people, know that the bathrooms are down the hallway that way out the back door. Before I introduce Zebith, I'll also mention that next month's program is on Sunday, July 21st at 2 p.m. It's the Globe-Trotting Primates. And that will be presented by Anelia Hogan and Jonathan Perry, who work at the Western University of Health Sciences. What do we know about primates in Oregon besides humans from the fossil record? Should be a very fun talk. Where did Zebith go? She disappeared. Zebith Stacy Thalden is an artist, educator, and author. Her work combines art and ecology, celebrating biological diversity and the interconnectivity between humans and other species. She received a BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design and an MFA focused on painting and entomology, the study of insects, from Goddard College. She teaches and works in Portland, although beginning this Monday she'll be teaching a 3-day workshop at the Sitka Center, which most of us here know. Zebith's artwork has been featured in the CICA Museum in South Korea, the Academy of Sciences in Australia, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science in Washington, D.C. She's received residencies from Zion National Park, Playa, the Center for the Intersection of Art and Science. Zebith's very recently published book, The Insect Artist, encourages readers to explore the natural world and to celebrate it through art. Her book is available for purchase at the back table after the talk ends. Cash only. Sorry about that. The reader isn't working today. Zebith.
Thank you, Sally, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming out today. I'm delighted that you were willing to come here on your Saturday and learn about this book and these insects. I am going to be doing the presentation in 2 different parts. We're going to have a visual component, which I'm hoping will already need help with.
She has a, yeah, I think she needs to get closer.
The microphone is
Minor adjustments momentarily. Is this better?
So I need to ask.
Is this better? Yes, no?
Closer to the
We
mic.
need a little
closer?
Yeah.
I can stand actually a little closer.
Your face there.
I just want them to be able to hear, so if it works for you guys, it's going to work for
Much
me.
better,
Would the
yes.
volume be turned up out?
It's all the way up.
It's all the way up.
We don't have a wide on this one. So now,
It's better. It's good.
it was.
There we go. Beautiful. Okay.
Zebith, is this going to be, hello? Hey, is this going to be recorded?
Yes.
Right behind you.
Yeah. Thank you. So again, thank you for coming. I'm delighted that you're here. I'm going to be doing the presentation in 2 different parts. One is going to be a visual component, and then after that is all set. We're going to just be talking informally. And what I want to describe are the undercurrents of the ideology of art, also the understanding of what the book offers, but also how you can deepen your relationship to art yourselves, and a bit about the past and how this book actually rests upon so many incredible people that, that create insect illustration. This is a co-creation between media and action and artist. Nature illustration is when you combine these together. One of the most incredible things about being an artist is being able to witness taking paint and saturating it until it becomes liquid, and then watching it spread across the page where it's expanding and it's creating negative space and positive space simultaneously. And you get to actually witness that as an artist in real time. It's such an incredible unfolding as you're watching all of the pigments and they find their spaces as they uproot all of the paper fibers, and you witness as this happens. And as you're working, it feels like you're watching something that is magical unfolding on the page that's right in front of you. So certainly there's technique involved, but there's also the experiential component to it. And when you're practicing technique, there's the opportunity to take that pigment with intentionality and turn it into the fuzz on a bumblebee, or the more shiny elements that are on the legs, or the glass-like experience that you see when you look into the eye. And so having that intentionality and putting that into your work by simply learning the techniques, you can do things that you're really wanting to do and guide those pigments, whether it's pencil or colored pencil or paint, which, you know, with a watery element, you know, using that, you're really working together, which is why I call it a co-creation. Because anybody that has tried using watery pigments knows sometimes it has a mind of itself. And so sometimes you're able to create, say, I really want to create a mushroom cap and I want to have reflected light on that, and I want to be able to show that. Exactly how do you do that? How does that come into being? Or to create an area of a being that is translucent or illuminated from the interior, like the abdomen of this weaver ant or the stem of the small mushroom. What are the differences that you do as an artist to be able to create one and not the other? What is a mushroom stem that is just light in color? The difference between that which is illuminated from within. Those can be almost the same colors, but learning the understanding of what the difference is can help you communicate those things. Now, all of these rest upon such a beautiful lineage. And so I'm going to go into a little bit of the history of scientific illustration. And I'm only going to show a few slides, which was very difficult to pare down. It's one of my favorite subjects. And I'm going to begin with Durr. Albrecht Durr created this stag beetle. And you have to understand, this is not surprising to us today. However, at the time, in 1505, insects were used to decorate text. That was the purpose. It was to make text more interesting. You would have illuminated manuscripts, and you would have these beautiful, intricate insects and birds and all sorts of other creatures and designs in the perimeter of the text. Well, Durr said, I don't want to do that. I want to just focus on the stag beetle. And it was shocking to people at the time. Now, Maria Sibylla Merian very overlapped the time with Charles Darwin. Now, while Darwin was, when he was 22, was traveling the world and focusing primarily on South America, Maria, by herself, took a voyage to Suriname with her daughter. And she studied all of the specimens and the species that were there so that she could learn and understand. So very similar to Darwin, she was creating images in a notebook, what we now call a sketchbook, and noting all of her observations. At this time, it was understood that there were caterpillars, there were chrysalis and cocoons, there were moths, and there were butterflies. We understood this. Of course, we saw them all the time. However, we didn't understand understand where they were coming from. There was a theory that they were magically just coming right out of the mud. And it was because of Maria that we now understand that that is actually a transitional journey from one to the other within a single species. She's the one that documented that. And so she created all of these plates, and it's just absolutely incredibly beautiful images like the one you see here. And that was really her magnum opus of the work that she created and learned from being in Suriname. Very important figure in our history. And by that point, the microscope had already been invented. And Jan Swammerdam, he started to investigate different species. He focused on the bee and really helped bring to light and bring to the world the understanding of what was under that microscope in regards to different species. Just an incredible thing to imagine. Can you imagine looking under a microscope for the first time, having it invented, and nobody had seen this view before, much the way we think about space now. This is where the undiscovered really was. And so he was looking into the anatomy and really discovering the different portions. You know, humans, in comparison to many of these species, are humongous. And so to get down to this level, you get to learn so much more. By the way, Jean was the first person to see and identify what a red blood cell looks like. And it was because of him that we have that beginning of that understanding. Now, if we're going to go way, way back as far as we can go in the understanding of insect illustration, going back to ancient Egypt. Both of these images are found in different tombs. The ancient Egyptians created honey, they had wax, they kept bees. The hieroglyphics I consider part of this lineage of the insect illustrators. And if we go back as far as we know, back to a cave in France, the cave paintings, beneath them there was a bison bone. Upon that bison bone was scratched a single cricket. That cricket is the very first insect illustration that we know of. It was 15,000 years ago. And this book that you will take a look at is upon the lineage that I'm speaking of. It is a guidebook, but it is so much more than a guidebook. When you first see it on a shelf, it is simply an invitation. It's an invitation to your inner artist. Just wondering with curiosity what it is that you might do. So it's inviting you to take a look, but it's also inviting you to a whole world behind the book. It's inviting you to change your life more creatively. My hope is that it will be, once you open it up, my hoping is that it will be a teacher that is both kind and diligent and is always there when you need them, and also a resource in the future. I would love for it to become tattered and be that thing on the shelf. I really would love for somebody to be like, what book is this? Because it no longer has a cover. Because it's more than a textbook, it will teach you how to incorporate art into your life. It will help you incorporate and communicate your observations in a visual language. There are 15 chapters, which are broken up into 3 different sections, although it starts with a preparation, which has so much resources that you can use for every single chapter. This book is available for beginning artists. If you're someone in the room that is like, I don't even know why I came to this talk, I don't even know why I bought this book, what am I doing? This is for people so that you can develop a really strong foundation from the very beginning of when you start art. For those of you who are artists in the room, it will help deepen and create a more advanced practice, one that you can truly rely on. All of the compositions are very carefully selected, more than for the insects themselves, the species. Every single species that's in the book is based on the composition that it is within. So I am looking as both an artist and an instructor to try to create a subject that will have the most educational value to you. My hope is that this will support you. I'm hoping that it will create a real toolkit for you as you progress forward and as you create an established practice. Each of the chapters begins with a bit of information about the species. Sometimes that will talk about the characteristics, it might talk about where the insect is from, and it will also sometimes go into the conservation status and certainly where, if there are any components about its habitat that are important. And then also how it relates to art and the progress that you will go through in the chapter itself. In addition, there's also a materials list on the side so that you know exactly what you need and can check them off as you have them. Each of the chapters has both a visual component and a text component so that you can follow along visually but also follow along with the text. All of the illustrations start with a pencil drawing, and I like to start the drawings immediately. There's a lot of times when there's apprehension, there's that idea of the blank page. You know, it's for writers and for artists as well. You know, how do you break through that? And I like to show a way just to get something on the page immediately, just so that it's down there. But also, I want your drawings to be able to build upon one another, so that they actually help you along the way, that you are never wasting time. And then getting into the proportions and the measurements of them. So sometimes I'll talk to people about measuring. Measuring takes longer, right? It takes time and it takes some diligence, but you're not going to be erasing and re-erasing. You're not going to get down to almost finishing the drawing and realize, oh, this foot down here is very small. Well, this foot up here is gigantic. There's clearly something off. You are going to be building this up with success from the very first line that you start all the way through the refinement of that drawing. So it creates more success from the very beginning. The second stage is applying paint. I guide participants to use acrylic paint. That's what the book is based in. But if you're a watercolor painter, this is almost identical. So if you're well versed in watercolor, you can continue in that. They're very, very similar. There's only a few things that are different between the acrylic that you can't do, primarily layering. Once an acrylic layer has dried, you can paint right on top of it. You can put as much water on there as you want. So that's just something to be aware of as you're working with these. Primarily so that if you do something in watercolor and it doesn't work very well because of the directions, you know it's because of the choice that you made, as opposed to it being something that would come down on not doing something correctly. So again, getting into the encouragement that's in the book that I'm hoping will guide you along. And then the last stage is colored pencil, where once you're progressing through the book, which does advance with you, every single chapter actually guides you toward getting more and more tools and techniques through the tricks that are in the book. And the third section of every composition is actually the colored pencil. Now, the paint is really what adds volume, it adds depth, and the depth can be an inch. You can be talking about the head of a caterpillar to its tail. Or you could be talking about the depth from the, it could even be a field of flowers. You know, you could be talking about 5 feet, you could be talking about 20 feet. So the paint is really where that depth comes, but it also adds the solidity. Now you've got the measurements, you've got the correct proportions, then you've got the solidity, and then when you add the colored pencil on top of that, well then you're just adding details. And those details are truly what allow it to come to life and make it look like it is sitting on the page, look like there's a light source somewhere else that is shining onto it and giving it that true volume. In addition to my work in the book, and also I want to mention that a lot of guidebooks, they will teach you how to copy the author. That your goal in the book is truly to replicate what they're doing. That is not what this book is about. In the back of the book, there are full color reference images so that you can literally see the images I was using. We are going to do it together. And you will be able to read read the description of the step, look at the image that I did, and then create your painting. This book is about advancing your skills, period. The reference images also not only have the image that I used, but they also often have other images. Because I want you to understand this in the round. One of the many things that is a limitation of photography is that it flattens. And it also only gives you one view. I don't want you to have one view. I want you to understand a species. So, and the environment that it's in. So, for instance, with the ladybug, you're going to understand the front view, the side view, with the wings out. I don't think I have one of the underneath, probably just because I couldn't find it. But I want you to be able to really understand all of these species in the round. The other thing is that there are 4 examples of participant work, so that you're not just going to see my work in the book. You're actually going to be able to see people who are just like you, who were kind enough to me to take on a few of the chapters in the very, very beginning of making the book, so that I can understand, is there anything that needs to be tweaked? How did that go for you? And to really make this the best book I possibly could. But the incredible benefit is that you're going to be able to see 4 examples of the work from the chapters that you will go through before you go through them. We are all in this together, in a sense. Now, the last few slides are examples of the exercises that are at the back of the chapters. And the chapters, the projects themselves that are within the chapters, they're going to take time. They're going to be something you're going to do in multiple sittings. You're going to work from one stage to the next stage. You're going to return to it. It's going to take some time. These nature breaks come in between each of the longer chapters, each of the longer projects, so that you could do them in one day. You could even do them in one sitting. Some of them are indoors, some of them are outdoors, and when you're working on them, you can do them more than once. You can come back to them over and over and over again. You could do them in any season. Because some are outdoors, certainly there will be much that's different when you're in even the same place or even from a different angle in that place. This one in particular is based on color theory. It is guiding you through understanding some of the more technical aspects of color and how to understand them when you're interpreting. Some of the nature breaks come intentionally before a chapter so that it can prepare you. They're just focused on one subject so that you can really hone in and develop those tools. And then when you go into the chapter, into the next project, then you'll be able to literally apply them into a much greater framework when you're dealing with measurement and you're dealing with color mixing. Now you'll have that practice under your belt. Also, for the scientists that are in the room, these are a great opportunity for you to be able to explore how art can fit into your work. I really encourage you to use any subject. I don't necessarily want to encourage you to just focus on insects. I want you to focus on what inspires you in the moment, Let's say you're out in a park, let's say you're at the beach, and you just found something, you have your sketchbook, you want to sketch it. The important thing is to be sketching and choosing something that will help you to understand the lesson the most. So you may need to be selective, but the point is to fill your sketchbook up. You know, the projects are going to be creating more finished work. It's going to be more refined work. This is a real opportunity to sketch and explore and start one and turn the page and start another. Maybe you fill up a page with multiple ones. Maybe you just do it for an hour. Maybe you spend a whole day, in one place or in multiple places. And this is a real opportunity to do it. So it is a breath of fresh air in between the deep dive where you're really learning those techniques. This one is based on incorporating text in with sketches. And the interesting thing is to go back to the history that I just mentioned. It's very, very similar to what they were doing, right? Taking a sketch, putting an observation, and the thing with natural journaling is that you can do absolutely any subject that you want. This is experiential. This is my experience, which I'll tell you the story in a moment. But you can also put your observation. This is what this anatomy looked like. This is what I noticed. This is the color. I want, as an artist, past artist, personal, to future artist, personal, I want you to make sure that you remember this one transition or this one form that I noticed. So it can be things that you are observing that you can put on the page as well. But with this, I was simply getting a beverage at a coffee house. And I walked out, and it was an urban area, and there were, how there's those squares in the sidewalk, and then there's, planted trees, right? And so I walked out, and people are often noticing me in the world. If you ever see me by myself in the world, I'm most often going, for a really long amount of time, uncomfortably so. So I walked out, I had my beverage, and I looked up momentarily, and I noticed that this tree above me was covered in aphids. Every single leaf had small, large, the whole thing. There was just, I don't know, hundreds, if not 1,000 of them. And I was staring at them just in disbelief. The things that might be above us or next to us, and that in the shuffle we might miss. And so I'm looking at these aphids, just astounded. And I went home and I got my sketchbook, and I actually came back. And I was standing there on the sidewalk, just sketching this leaf and these aphids. And when I started looking at the bark of the tree and I looked down, I noticed that there was this little collection of rows of little ovals, beautiful bright orange ovals in this little cluster. And I was like, wow, what could those be? Never would I have noticed these had I not taken my sketchbook and really stood there to observe and notice. And so I was looking at them, and so I didn't know what they were. And so all I did was sketch them. What can I do? I can take down as much documentation as I possibly can in the moment, and then come back later and research. So I did this whole sketch, I went home and I researched, and of course found that they were ladybugs. Of course they were ladybug eggs. Of course a ladybug would come along and say, oh, look at all these aphids. I know exactly what to feed my young. Here you go. And so there was this whole little ecosystem happening in this incredibly urban area. Now you have to remember, now that I feel like we're all standing around this tree, right? You have to remember, there's cars passing by, there's people in this, you have to remember this is an urban area with lots of stores where this is happening all around us. But the thing is to really take your time with a single species. Really take a look. Really noticing. And I like to even think about, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but imagining what this species is going through, what its life is like, especially ones that are intertwined within the decisions that we make for our landscape. And as an artist, really noticing, what does that shape really look like? Is it a curve? Does it slightly S curve, or is it just a rounded curve? Or maybe it's slightly S and then it goes back out a little bit. And being able to acknowledge the assumptions that we make, and being able to really question, is that really what you see? Is that really the color? Is it darker? Is it warmer? Is it a little more blue? What exactly are you looking at? And then being able to translate that onto the page. This is where I believe inspiration is born. Not only that, but knowledge can be built here. And most importantly, and an undercurrent for the book, is that I believe this is where connection is made. And where an understanding of where things in the ecosystem that we are included in are thriving and where they are suffering. One of the participants who I requested to help me in the beginning, this was the piece that they worked on, and when they replicated it, this is my work, but when they did their piece, one of the things that she said was, as I was working on it, I found that I befriended this caterpillar. You have to remember this took time. This is repeatedly coming back to the same subject, adding more lines, adding more colors, learning more, not just about technique, but also about the species itself. And so she said, it was amazing. Befriending this caterpillar was an incredible thing that developed by working on the art itself. And noticing really closely as you are drawing and observing can be extremely important. Sometimes it's not just about your technique, it's not just about accuracy, but sometimes it's actually about the species itself. If you notice, when you look at this butterfly, this is the Idea lucano. The common name is, well, there's many common names, but the paper kite butterfly. And when you notice, it's resting on 4 legs. This is not 4-legged. And so you might notice something confusing as you're looking at a species. That doesn't make any sense. For this to fit into this category of insects, it has to have 6 legs. And you may look again, no, it really is. It really is resting on 4 legs. How can that possibly be? And one of the things that's really nice is when you're sketching, let's say you're doing a nature break, and you find something confusing like this, the curiosity itself is so important. And when that leads to research, you can find that in fact, this butterfly and all of the butterflies within the family actually have, they're truncated, that first leg. And the second 2 legs are the ones that it stands on, but that very first leg is actually held up against the thorax very, very tight. Now, as an artist, you might look at that as a pattern, which is fine. If that's replicated accurately, it doesn't matter. However, if it's replicated just as a pattern, it may no longer have the straight lines of a leg, which actually fits this species into its category. So that's a pretty important change and power that an artist can have. So when you're observing to that level, it can really change everything. And also this piece on the right is just a detail of the actual rendering that's in the book. So it's about 1 inch. So this is a magnification that's pretty extreme, so that you can see that. And on here, just to identify where that is, if you look at the left eye, you can see a black stripe that goes from the left eye and it goes down to where all of the legs meet. And then there is a little bit of white above that line and a little bit of white below that line. That is a reduced leg. So you can see how easily you could miss that, right? So that brings us to where we are today, where we're sitting here on the Oregon coast. And considering what is it that is around you? What is it that you are seeing? The important piece is to truly see through creativity's eyes, and it will change the world around you. It will change the world that you are literally seeing. When you're looking at, maybe you go out and you find a sea urchin, and the difference between, if you have a sea urchin that's on the beach, like with the spikes are all gone, right? And it's just hollow. It's spending time with that and really taking a look at what it looks like. Well, once you start looking at that over decades, over weeks or even days, sometimes there will be changes that you'll notice. Why are there so many here today? That can help you understand what's going on in the ecosystem around you. It's in these nuances that can change the world that you've already seen, and I think that's the most important point, is that we've all gone to the beach, and depending on your perspective when you're there, it changes the beach itself. Imagine if you were only in tide pools. Imagine if you spent an hour with a sea urchin. Imagine if you only looked up or out, how different your perspective is. And to spend time just exploring. But when you take your sketchbook with you and you're drawing, you're able to see in a way that you wouldn't just observing. You are taking notice because you have to notice. You have to be able to translate from one piece to another. So that concludes the part of the visual portion. And now I want to talk about how art relates as a tool for research. That this can be, this can be an opportunity to explore species, habitats, ecosystems. Whether you're a biologist, an ecologist, a conservationist, an environmentalist, whether you're working in a team or you're working individually, whether you're out in the field or you're in the lab, you can incorporate art into the work that you're doing. It can help you see details, and it's an opportunity to bridge interdisciplinarily so that you're incorporating the way that an artist sees into the work that you're doing as a scientist and bridging that gap. Artists, in a sense, by practicing and developing their technique, are in a sense fluent in art, which is such a nice change from using the term mastery to saying that you're fluent. And by being fluent, that really opens up an opportunity, not so much of I am mastering this, which is such an overcoming term. It's also very independent. But when you talk about being fluent, you're talking about a communication, and inherently you are including a silent language through the portal of your artwork. So in a sense it becomes a silent dialogue. Now, what does it mean to be an artist? We use that term a lot of times. I hear people all the time say, well, I'm not an artist. Like, I wouldn't call myself an artist. People do, who do people do? So it's like, well, what is an artist? And as I describe in the book and my personal philosophy, all you have to do is do art. If you're doing art, you are an artist. If you and to be, the identity piece, to be an artist, you just have to return to the practice. You just have to come back. It doesn't even matter if there's rest. Of course, it should incorporate rest. It should incorporate, it can incorporate pause. It can also incorporate return. I have some people who I'm teaching who will say, I haven't done this in years. Great, you came back. Congratulations, you are back to your practice, and it continues onward. That to me is the only thing that you need to have the definition and the identity of an artist. I will also tell you, as many of you already know, there is a learning curve. It takes time. It is not easy sometimes. I'm not trying to paint rose-colored glasses about being an artist. It can be incredibly frustrating sometimes. Sometimes you do need to walk away. You might need to walk away. Let's put that in the maybe category. But it can also be extremely rewarding. It can be enjoyable, fun, also unexpected and surprising. The most important thing is just to simply start where you are. Celebrate where you are. There's a lot of stigma around art, and a lot of people have had experiences where someone may have said, you should not be doing art. Like, you should be doing something else. Whether it's a parent, a teacher, a sibling, even your own experience, you might have been the person who said that. Art in itself, whether we like art or not, is subjective. There is nobody that can tell you whether you should be doing art or not but you. You have complete authority over it. Being creative is your birthright. You get to do it. If you don't want to do it, you get to say you don't want to do it. But nobody else has the authority to be able to tell you that you should or shouldn't be creative. That's all yours. I also want to encourage you not to see art as a way to shine. It can be dangerous to rely on other people's opinions because of that subjectivity. What I'm hoping is that you will see the creation process externally as a creation process, that creating art is simply a process that you do, and it creates this piece, and it is an experience that you go through. But then internally think of it as a learning, and the feeling and the just the experience that you go through internally, what you get to see, what you get to witness. So making products on the outside, and then learning on the inside. But also, I hope that you'll celebrate. I hope you'll celebrate all the time. In the book, I encourage you to celebrate everything. Little things, big things. You deserve to be able to celebrate everything and every accomplishment. And it should be guided by goals. The thing is about judgment is that there's this negativity about needing to be somewhere else. That you should be, there's the shoulds in our culture. There's also the comparisons. But you get to be where you're at. I love hearing when people are like, oh, I can only draw stick figures. I was like, well, you couldn't do that at one point. At one point, you were not able to draw a stick figure, and now you are. Congratulations, you've made it to stick figure done. Here you are. And to be able to stay with the practice. This, creating art takes both discipline and practice. And I use those words as both a verb and a noun simultaneously. Because, let's see if I can get this straight. Because practice takes discipline. You need to show up for it to be able to advance. And and discipline, it just takes practice. So that you can have that discipline, so that you can get better, so that you can come back to your practice and you can say, I didn't know that before, and now I do, and I'm moving on. And that is one of the things that the book can do, is to help you. But you only have to start where you are. You only have to be who you are. You don't have to be better at art than you are today. You just need to get the book and let it guide you through that. Another thing about the book that I want to mention is that nope, I already forgot. So I'm going to skip forward. My hope is that this book will be supportive. I'm hoping that it will be rewarding. And it will create an art practice that helps species have visibility. You have to remember that when you're creating art, and I have a section in the book that talks about sharing art with others. Sometimes art is a very personal practice. Sometimes it shouldn't be shared with others. Sometimes it should be shared in a gallery setting and shared with strangers or family only, however you want to share it with. But what you need to remember is that you, because of that silent dialogue that we talked about before, you are communicating through your work to someone else. And so you can be talking about the preservation of habitat. You can be showing species visibility. You can be saying, this is really important. Just like Albrecht Dürer said, this stag beetle is important to me. It is important. And so you can be doing that through your art in a way that photography simply can't. You can focus photography in a way that will emphasize. But when you're doing your own art, you're able to actually focus on exactly what you want. You're able to focus on one section. Imagine everything being in black and white and something being in color, and you're focusing on that. You're creating lines that are thicker in a certain area to really bring that out. I hope those that are in scientific fields will explore artistic creativity. And to end, I would just like to read my notes, because I don't want to miss anything from here. I believe that noticing, we can see where there is growth and where there is suffering. Like the illustrating environmental scientists of the past, art can help you explain this to others, accompanied by and more fully than you can verbally or with written word. Because art is a verbal language, that what we see and understand can inspire more than curiosity and creative drive. It can allow for a profound connection to the natural world, giving perspective on and the importance of species. My hope is that this book will deepen for you in multiple channels, develop a supportive and rewarding art practice, obtain skills to use art to document and communicate, and create artwork that helps species visibility, and inspire the protection and the preservation of landscapes and for non-human inhabitants so that they can thrive around us, with us. As an extension to this, I also hope to encourage people in scientific fields to explore not only the artistic component in their research, but to incorporate artists into their teams, to allow that perspective and documentation to be a valuable and key component to the results of your work. I wrote this book so that those interested in trying art and established artists can have a strong creative practice with encouragement and advancement while working toward achieving goals. I hope that it will serve each of you well. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. We have books at the back. I can sign any books that you purchase. And I just thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything that you would like me to touch on, or things that I didn't address, or you'd like me to speak more in depth on? Any questions? Yeah.
Have you ever studied the living sand dollar?
I have not. I have not studied sand dollars. I would love to study them.
I've seen two throughout my time, so I just wonder how it would look, because it moves so slow.
When they're all red, and yes, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing, is that to be able to observe, especially the way that something functions, You know, I mean, in art, you capture that in stages, right? Like you would show multiple images that would be showing, okay, you're situated here, and then it slowly moves so that you understand it. And that's just the glory of having time and taking the time to observe. It's an incredible thing to witness what is happening all around us, and especially with insects, but with so many species going extinct at such an incredible rate. We are in a very special, in addition to every other sliver, we are in a very special sliver of evolution. And yes, our responsibility, we have to clean dishes. We want to meet with our friends. There is time for our phone. But there also should be time to notice what's happening. The fact that there's all these aphids on this tree, and then there's this ladybug that came along that's no longer even there. That's history, laying these eggs. That there's so much happening, and to take the time to really see it, it's just so incredible. Yeah, thank you. Other questions?
Have you followed any specific species?
Have I what?
Followed any specific species?
Followed them in what sense? Say more.
Done any research projects or anything on a particular bug?
So taking one and watching it, or I research all of the species that I'm working with. When I'm doing art, I tend to use so many photographs, and I do a ton of research so that I really understand not just the physical anatomy, but also the context. When I was in school, I studied in an entomology lab, and it was incredible to be able to explore just all of these different species. So that was the most that I have done, is really looking at them individually, looking at families. But as far as following one throughout a research project, I would love to do that. That's my future. Other questions? Yeah.
Who turned you on to doing this type of follow that passion?
Which one? Which subjects? Like the insects themselves or the art itself?
The art.
So to give you a little bit of background, I used to be a furniture designer, and I was a woodworker, and I built furniture for 10 years. And my body very quickly let me know at the end of that 10 years that this career was not going to continue, and I was very confused as to where I was headed. And I took some time. And to me, because art is a tool, just like a camera is a tool, and it should be used that way. It shouldn't be used as a given. I have a camera, therefore I'm taking a picture. Cameras are really good for certain things, and illustrating is really good for certain things. And so it's best to use the best tool for the job. And I had questions. I had questions about what I was seeing in the natural world. And so I grabbed my sketchbook and I started sketching. And so it helps me remember, and it also helps me remember what I've seen, not just on the page, so when I'm researching I can go, oh yeah, it really was that color, or it really was this, or whatever. But it also helps me remember in my mind what I saw. And I've learned so much through the art. Sometimes I will create art, and then I will look at the art to learn what I drew, or painted, or illustrated, to be able to really understand what it was that I was seeing. So if I'm so close to something that I'm replicating a certain color, and I'm just replicating the color because it's there. Much like what I told you about the leg, of that insect, right? It's like, I know that this is accurate, I'm just gonna do this. I'm not doing any research, I'm just gonna do it as an artist. And to go through that piece, and then to look at the piece, and then say, wow, those two lines are straight. That's so weird for a thorax that's curved to have two straight lines. How is that possible? That's funny. So I learned color theory from a beetle that I was working on. Yeah, there was a lot that I learned from that beetle. And so to me, the illustration is, I guess it's a form, like going back to the collaboration. It's my collaborator. And then it's broken up into more collaborators. So then there's the media that I choose to use. Using pastels, for instance, versus using this 3-step process that I developed through my career, and the book itself just developed through both being an artist and being an instructor. So to me, it was just something that was needed. It was the answer. It was both the ingredients and the product. No, it was both the ingredients and the means. And then the product becomes something totally different, right? Because then you have the artwork itself, and then you have the ability to share that with the world. And then creating a book is a completely different aspect to that, because then it cycles right back to the beginning where other people are creating. So it's an interesting process. Yeah.
So how do you get the pencil on top of the acrylic paint? Because the acrylic paint is shiny and...
Thank you so much for asking that. So yes, so if you paint with acrylic paint the way people typically do, right? You can even see it; it's very textured. It's impossible to be able to draw on top of it. And one of the things that I do, and I teach in the book with this 3-step process I developed, is that you stain paper. It's extremely saturated acrylic paints. So it's used very, very similar to watercolors. So you're just staining the paint, and I even mentioned in the book, if there's a sheen on your paper, it's too thick, you need more water. So if you're having trouble with that, the colored pencil actually working on top of it, that's usually the reason. And, or sometimes it's the type of colored pencil that you're using, so you always want to test things out, just to make sure if you use something different than is suggested in the book. Yeah.
So I'm a teacher,
Yeah.
and a retired teacher, but I still work with kids and other teachers, and I'm from Montana, and so I try to get kids to do nature journaling.
Yeah.
I try to, and we do camps in the mountains and stuff, but I haven't found any great steps to support the student or the adult who feel like they can't make something. They're expecting to do some kind of hyper-realism sketch.
Yeah.
And then when they're out in the field and they're starting to do it, and it's not looking like how they want it to look like what they're representing as well. Is there any advice you have to support people?
Tell me more. Tell me exactly what is their stumbling block. Where do you find, what exactly happens that you find that someone says, oh, this is it, I'm frustrated, or I don't.
Well, say we're doing a mural, we have a mural and we're doing layers of what we're seeing. And I find that people, when they start, drawing, if it doesn't, it's like the piano player when you're learning, it takes a lot of practice. But how do you support people through just trying and putting something on paper when if they try and they don't feel like it looks good enough, then they want to stop or they get discouraged?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's two different ways here. There's the psychological way, right? Which, there's all sorts of things that come up. With anything we practice, right? All of our stuff can come up. And whatever beliefs we have that are actually not at all helpful, and can squelch the freedom of creativity and the desire to even do art, and can even squelch curiosity. But the problem is that when you stop at that stage, and this is not what I'm suggesting, but when you stop at that stage, you never get past that stage. Then you just have to go through it over and over again every time somebody brings it up. So it's nice to get through that stage, The question, the answer, of course, to how is, there's a couple of things. First of all, can you incorporate things from the beginning that make that moment not happen? Right? So it's like what I was talking about with the book. You know, is it a drawing issue? Was it, you know, because your painting won't be better than your drawing, right? So can you make it so that your drawing is accurate enough in the beginning so that you don't get to that stage? You know, avoid the stage altogether. As a teacher, that's ideal. But then, regardless, you can get to that stage. And as artists, also, as a kind of a side note to your question, we all have stages to our practice. You know, there's different stages. I talk about the stages that I have witnessed in my students and is in my own practice in the book. So you can see what I suggest as those stages, but you have to look for your own stages. We just come up against it. Oh, here's that moment again where I think this belief, and then I want to have this action, which will stop me from doing art. Here I am. And not having any judgment about that, just like, oh, here I am again, I know me, this is very typical. But with a student, it depends on the student. One of the things is, it's okay to fail. And I'm using failure here in a kind of jarring way, because the important thing is that mistakes and failure are equal to success. I mean, they're equal to advancement, and they are both under the umbrella of success. Like, it is part of the journey, and to think that we're not going to have any mistakes is setting ourselves up for failure, and that's just not fair. We deserve better than that. So if I was working with a student, sounds like this is a young student, or both adults?
I'm working with high school kids.
Yeah. What grade? Or all?
All high school, like freshmen, seniors.
If I were working with a high school student, you know, it's interesting because it's a teachable moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a moment where you get to decide what happens. Does that student need help with perseverance? That's a different way to go. Mm-hmm. Is that student bogged down with perfectionism? Mm-hmm. Does that student need to be able to hear someone say, I love it. It's not what we had on the drawing, but that's great. That's what we're looking for. Or, okay, here we are. Like, here we are with this flower that isn't what we planned. What are we going to do? Let's make a decision now. Do we want it to be more accurate? Do we want it to be a different color? Do we want it to be this or that? But that takes teamwork. And if a student isn't interested in that, and what they're saying is, I didn't do this right, but I actually want to talk to my friend. It's a whole other story.
Because that's much more pleasant than being a failure.
Right, exactly. So it just depends. I mean, sometimes it really is, well, you know, we need to keep working and we need to finish things. Any last questions? All right, I thank you so much. I really appreciated being here. And I will be around if you have any questions personally, and I'll be able to sign any books you have toward the back of the room, so just let me know if that's needed.